In this video, we are going to start looking at how we can use maps in our mobile app. So in AppStudio, there are a few options available to us. The first of which, an option built into AppStudio, is Google Maps. So if we searched in the toolbox and we search for map, we can actually see that there is a Google Map control that we could drag in. And as we can see here, what we need to do to actually make this work is to set up all of these different properties here, most notably the API key. Now, there's some documentation on the AppStudio website for Google Maps, and you can see here how you can get it to work. Most important point here is this API key. Now, this is effectively a key that's issued by Google. And to get this, you would need to sign up for an account, a developer account, and create an app on Google and request an API key, which you could then use in this control. Now, that's one of the downsides of using Google Maps, even though as a mapping system, Google Maps is obviously very advanced and a lot of people are used to using it. But because of this API key issue and limited use, the fact that you are limited to what you can use Google Maps in, especially if it's a more professional app or that you're using for commercial purposes, we're going to avoid Google Maps in this tutorial. So I'm just going to delete this control. What we're going to look at is something called Leaflet Js, so Leaflet Maps, which is a nice open source JavaScript library for mobile-friendly interactive maps. And Leaflet, you can just use it in websites, or we can also use it in our mobile app, because of course the code that we're writing in AppStudio is JavaScript. Now, if we went over to AppStudio and opened one of the sample projects, let's cancel this, just save, open sample project. We'll get this prompt where there's lots of sample code here. And if we actually did a search for Leaflet, we can actually see that there is a JavaScript example of a leaflet map, that's nice to know because it shows that it can be done. And I actually had a look at this earlier, and it just demonstrated that it was easy to do. As an example, it had a little bit of quite a bit of functionality with buttons to show the map, etc. So instead of looking at this tutorial, which is useful, and so I'd recommend you having a look at it if you wanted to, I'm going to start from scratch and just get the bare bones basic map using Leaflet built into my demo app. So we'll start doing this by creating a new form. So let's clear our search on there, and we'll go add new form, and we are going to call it map form. So I double click to rename. Okay, let's sort out the navigation for this as well so we can reach it. So from previous tutorials, we have our global header and hamburger menu. So if we view the code, we've got our hamburger menu code on our form 1, but if we remember from this line, it's being applied globally throughout our app, which is great. So let's add another item. Let's set up map item, map form. Let's also, while we're here, let's change this item to a more sensible name on the menu. And of course, we need to actually update the hamburger menu items. So let's go to items. Form 2 to my details, just to keep things tidy. And we're going to add map. Okay. So let's just see where we are for now. So let's run this in our browser. Okay, and we can see we've got map item on the menu, and it's taking us to blank form, which is great. So this is a good example. I'd recommend testing things as you go along. As you add each individual change, it's good to test it, that it's still okay and you're not getting any new errors. So let's start going about implementing leaflet maps. Now, if you look at the Leaflet website, there are some good examples on the homepage. Essentially, this is the only code that we need when it comes to setting up the map. But if we look at tutorials and the quick start guide, we actually need to include a couple of header files, so CSS file and a JavaScript file, and then create an element on the page and a couple of other little bits. And then we have the example here of this is setting up the map and setting a starting point with a latitude and longitude, or lat long central point. Okay, so let's take this one step at a time. First, we are going to make sure we've got these header files included. So there are two here that we're going to include. So what I'm going to do in AppStudio, there is a way that you can include style sheets or JavaScript files in the header of the project. And to do this, we click on the project in the Project Explorer, and there is a property in the project called Extra Headers. So let's click on that, click the three dots, and then here we can copy in the code that we need to have in the header. So let's just move that out of the way. We'll copy this one, and we'll copy this one. Okay, we'll go OK. That's the first step. So this code will now be included on every on our whole app, which is what we need. Next, let's actually create a control that we'll be able to make the map appear in. So as we notice here on the tutorial, here, if you were creating raw HTML, you would need a div element with an ID set. In this case, map ID, but we can call it whatever we want. So instead of creating this code manually, we can actually just create a container, which effectively does actually create an HTML div in the background. So it does the same purpose, but in AppStudio, of course, we have the ability to just drag and drop controls. So let's drag that in. Now I want my map to be full screen. I don't want any borders. I want it to fill the whole screen of my app. That's something we're used to if you use the Google Maps mobile app, for example. So let's tweak the properties here to make that work. So I'm going to get rid of the border. I am going to make the width 100%. Set left to 0. Top, let's put that as, well, let's see how tall is our header, because we don't want it to go underneath or interfere with our header. So our header is 56 pixels high. So in our container, let's put the top as being 56. That should be about right. Our height, let's also put 100%. And that should fill up the complete height of our screen. Okay. Let's remove any content because we don't need that. And I think let's call it map container. Okay, so this will be the ID of this control, which is effectively, from an HTML point of view, it's a div. So let's save that, because we won't have anything to show as yet. Now the next point the next step is to implement the code that will run our map. So looking at this quick start tutorial on Leaflet, we can see the code you need to run is something like this. I have actually got some pre-prepared code which I'm going to drop in, and we're going to initialize it when the map form shows. So to do that, we right click on the form and go to event and on show. So that creates that on show event. I'm going to paste in the code that I have and I'll run through it with you. So what we've done here is identified the map container, which is this control. We're setting up as an l.map. Now L is the shorthand for leaflet. That's, if you look at the documentation, this is what it's telling us to do, l.map, and then set view. And instead of doing all of this in one line, I've effectively done it in 2 lines, just to keep things tidy. It also means we can refer to the map using a short variable called map NSB, as we're doing down here. And then this set of code here is adding the OpenStreetMap layer to the map. Now the benefit of Leaflet JS is that you could add multiple layers. You can add lots of different maps that are available free of charge. And the benefit of OpenStreetMap is that it is a freely available map, unlike Google. So we don't have to enter an API key. We don't have to sign any licenses. All they're asking is that you attribute usage. So you have a link that goes to OpenStreetMap to show that you're using that. Okay, so let's just test what we've got going on now. So if we run our app and make sure it's fully refreshed, we'll see if we get any errors. So no errors yet. Let's switch to the map. And there we go. We have a map actually working in our mobile app. And we can drag it around. You can see it's actually an interactive map. We've got the plus and minus. And we can see a little bit of unusual functionality there. So we've hit plus and minus, and our menu has disappeared. So there's a bug we'd need to fix, but we'll come back to that shortly. But effectively that's the first step in implementing a Leaflet JS map in AppStudio. So to recap what we've done, we created our map form. We created a container within it that we've made kind of full width, full height. And we've added some global extra header code to the project, and that was including the JavaScript and CSS to the whole project. And then the code that actually showed the map, we put that on the map form.onShow, and we've set the central point. We've added the layer, which is OpenStreetMap, and there we go. We have it actually working in our sample app.